Did anyone else get goosebumps when you saw the entire screen just pan out and you see the entire battlefield with a bunch of people just fighting? You see arrows, fire, catapults, all sorts of shit just going down. Did anyone else get goosebumps when they saw that in this episode? Not once, but twice. I mean, you saw the slow motion scene when Saray was just trying to purify everybody and you just see how he's feeling everyone's pain. Did anyone else get them chills and goosebumps? It felt so good. It felt so good watching this episode and seeing some of those scenes. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. And it wasn't even those scenes, too. It was also like the Alicia stuff with her fighting and all that. Very good stuff this episode. This episode kept my attention from start to finish. Very good, lines throughout this episode, and also some very good acting to scenes, to animation, art, just all around a very, very good episode. So before I get into the, the darker stuff of this episode, with the war to Alicia and all that type of stuff, let's talk about the beginning parts of this episode, like the comedy segments. So the episode starts off with kind of like a calm before the storm part. It's where a bunch of characters are just talking, interacting. We get to see some people that are with Alicia and how they're going to be traveling with her to help her out. We get to see where Saray, he's trying to travel to the war, and he, lets everybody know his standpoint on the war and what he would do. He will not side with anyone. He will not side with one or the other. If the conflict starts, he will not join one side. He will find a way to settle both sides equally. He's pretty much neutral on the battlefield. He is not on anyone's side. He is there for the sake of all humanity. That's what he's there for. He's not there for his own selfish reasons. He's there to help everyone out and purify all the Hellions. So Saray kind of lets us know his main motive in this war, what he's trying to accomplish. And on top of that, we have it to where Lila, she tries to say, like, hey, Saray needs to go to the war. He needs to. I mean, I know I said last week I don't want him to go, and he's not ready, but this is something eventually he needs to do. I mean, he needs to confront all this evil on the battlefield. He needs to be able to deal with this as a shepherd. And so she's like, I would have liked it if he never would have had to go to war. But this is something that has to happen, and since, all humanity really can't stop fighting, they have to kill each other, it's something that would have happened eventually. So, Saray has to go to the war to learn how to deal with the upcoming problems. And since now we found out the identity of the final boss of the series, now we know why Lila wanted him to learn more about, how to purify humans. Why it's such a big deal. Because the Lord of Calamity is apparently a human. Yeah, that apparently is what the final boss is. It is someone that was corrupted. We got to see an example of this a while back with, a human, being purified. We saw it last week. And then in this episode, we see it to where this big giant figure that literally is like mountain size is walking, and it is apparently a human Hellion. Holy fuck. So, Saray has a very big problem on his hands. I mean, you gotta go figure. I mean, if Saray already had that big of an issue with last week's episode dealing with the Hellion that took over that person, and then this week's episode, imagine how it's going to be taking down that big mountain-sized man that's a Hellion human. Just imagine how hard that's going to be just to bring someone like that down. And it's going to be insane. All of the pain and evil he's felt throughout his life, it might even destroy Saray. I can see that. I can see it to where the final part of, Tells of Zestiria might end with Saray maybe breaking himself just to be able to defeat the Lord of Calamity. I could see something like that happening. I really could, especially when it comes to, RPG-type games. I've seen it before when I was playing, and since this is based off of a game, I could see something like that happening. But let's talk about the war overall. So the war, when it came to the way the camera was, the camera angles, the way the fight was shown, I was really into it. And honestly, I haven't seen like a medieval fight like this since probably Game of Thrones. I remember watching the Battle of Bastards episode of Game of Thrones. Now, I'm not going to say that this episode was to that level. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Tales of Zestiria fans. I'm sorry. I'm just a big fan of Game of Thrones, and that Battle of Bastards fight just got me fucking pumped. But it's been a while since I've seen a fight that kind of had something to deal with something like this, just with catapults coming down, people fighting to the death in a war, medieval war. That's kind of what it reminded me of. I'm like, yo, this is badass, just seeing this just seeing a bunch of people going at it. You see these swords clanging against each other, people just stabbing each other into the ground. You just see the fire and the catapults coming in, launching and killing people. And when you had the guy on the hilltop say, just launch it, and you had the other guys say, like, but it'll hurt our people, it's like, dude, it doesn't matter. I'm like, yo, this reminds me of Battle of Bastards from Game of Thrones. I'm like, bro, this reminds me of that. So, I mean, just overall, the fighting was so good in this episode. You remember how last week it kind of was like, the fighting felt rather fast-paced and quick? Well, this episode, even though it was kind of fast-paced and it was quick, it was dealt in a better way. I love the way this episode was done. Now, Saray, though, you have it to where after he purifies one segment of the battlefield, he moves on. And he realizes, even though he cleared that one segment of the battlefield, it's not done. He still needs to continue to purify even more than he already did. And if it already broke him to that point where he was that hurt, where he was literally sweating, he could barely walk after all the evil he had to purify, just imagine how bad he's going to be when he has to clear all the others out that are coming his way. So, it's not the end, and I could see, Saray really changing throughout this fight, and maybe getting a lot of character development after seeing the darkness of humanity and what they have done in their life. I could see this definitely changing him. Now, Edna, let's talk about her real quick, okay? Now, I said I was going to get the comedy and the lighthearted stuff out of the way first, but I just need to talk about the war. Let's just talk about Edna for a second. You remember when she was first introduced and I talked about my overall impressions of her? She has a very cool personality that seems like she would be awesome in the future for different situations. Well, her personality at the beginning of this episode made me laugh quite a bit. The way she was just talking about dark stuff and all that, like a calamity comes first thing in the morning and late at night. I'm like, yo, Edna, I like her. I like her personality. I'm a big fan of Edna's personality, and I would really love to see more about her, but sadly, I don't think she probably will get as much characterization as maybe, like, the game would, because, I mean, when it comes to games, though, you have these little side moments, especially, like, if you go to a shop or something to buy items, usually you can talk with characters, so I could see, we're not getting as much character development or characterization for Edna or other characters, but I do like her personality, and the way she was speaking at the beginning of this episode, her personality is probably one of my favorites so far of this series, besides Alicia. Now, getting into Alicia, let's talk about her situation. So, she is in a crossfire right now. She's trying to stop the war between these two nations, and that's kind of what the plot was set up with last week's episode. And in this episode, she confronts one of the generals that are leading on her side of the army, or, her countrymen, and she tries to talk with him, but then all of a sudden, her own countrymen turns their sword against her, and this is a very sad thing, because her countrymen are being given orders by the general to harm her or even kill her if it comes to be necessary, just for they can continue this war and kill the other country for they can gain. And Alicia trying to put a stop to this is not something they want. And eventually, as she's trying to, fight her fellow countrymen, she doesn't want to harm them. She doesn't want to harm them. She doesn't want to kill them. She's just wanting to make them incapacitated where they can't move. And eventually, the fight drags on and it weighs her down when it comes to her stamina and stuff. And then she gets stabbed in the back. And, that sucks. I really hope she does not die. I hope not. I mean, since this is based off of a game, I know characters can die. See, if this was any normal series, like if this was a normal anime, I would say it's a potential possibility that she would be completely fine. Even at the end of the episode, it seems like she will be completely fine. But since this is based off of a game, and I've seen a lot of dark and gritty, RPG games, I could see maybe a possibility of her dying after that wound. But still, I hope she lives, because she is the best female character so far in the series. Oh yes, after last week's episode and what she did in this episode, she is best girl of the series. I do hope she continues on breathing and living and doesn't get killed, and hopefully she manages to get out of there. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. You all have a wonderful day, or night, wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.